Time for Focus. Today we have a report from Sicily on International Migrants Day, a day to recognise the rights and contributions of migrants around the world. More than 165,000 migrants have arrived on Italian shores this year, including some 25,000 children, most of them arriving alone. But they didn't necessarily flee poverty or violence alone, the perilous crossing claiming their loved ones. That's the case of an 8-year-old our correspondent Seema Gupta met. She sent us this report on the hopes and aspirations of migrant children.
At first glance, she looks like any other child, but at just 8 years old, Asmait is already a survivor. This is a reception center for migrants in southern Sicily. Asmait left Eritrea with her family, but the ship they used to cross the Mediterranean sank. Her mother and 2 of her brothers drowned.
She and her brother witnessed the death of their mother. There's nothing really more tragic than that. When they got here, they were withdrawn, closed. They're still mourning their mother's death.
Asmait's brother Samuel is 11. The 2 of them have been in Italy for 8 months now, and they're busy learning Italian. Like all underage migrants in Italy, Samuel cannot be forcibly repatriated. Italian law mandates that all minors landing on Italian soil be provided with safe housing, food, and access to education.
No, gli uomini primitivi. Dove vivevano questi uomini? Dentro le caverne. Bravissimo. Sta cominciando sostanzialmente adesso.
He's only now beginning to read and write. Yes, it's a little difficult, but he's trying very hard. I have to say he picks it up really quickly. The fact that he's still young means it's very easy for him to learn.
This shelter is funded by the state. There are hundreds of them in Italy today. Over 25,000 migrant children landed on the Italian coast this year, most of them arriving alone. Migrant arrivals are now a regular occurrence at this port in Pozzallo in southern Sicily. On this night alone, the Italian Navy rescued over 200 Nigerians, among them women and children.
The journey at sea left them exhausted. It's very scary right from the start. But after some time, they become playful again. They're young, 15, 16 years old. So they tend to make jokes. They're full of life. It's normal.
Once they arrive, the migrants are identified and divided into groups. The weakest are given medical help. Teenagers are bused to reception centers just for minors. We hid there in the morning. This center houses 20 teenagers. Some have been there for 2 months. They're supposed to stay for only 90 days before being transferred to more long-term facilities.
They've lost their innocence, they've lost hope, they've lost trust in adults. They think their lives and their bodies are for sale. They've never been given a hug. Not one caring hug.
Most of the migrant children are from Eritrea, Egypt and Somalia. During their journeys, some are tortured by people smugglers. 17-year-old Mohammed is from Egypt. He worked for 3 years to pay for the trip. For him, as for many others, Italy is only a first step.
I want to go to Germany. Many here have escaped. Yesterday, 3 left. They're scared, and they haven't got any money.
Some of those who remain are placed in the care of families. Like this one. NINO VINCI and his wife heeded a call by Pope Francis to open their home to those who need it most.
The most valuable asset we have is our family. So we decided to make ours available. Right from the start, he's really been a son to us. and he calls us mum and dad.
Abdirahman Hassan left Somalia on his own when he was 17. He crossed Ethiopia, Sudan and the Sahara before setting off from Libya on an inflatable boat to Europe. Today, he's working as an intern in a restaurant or pursuing his studies.
I always think of Somalia, because Somalia is my country. But in Somalia, there's war. People want to live, work, study, have a future. Because in my country, there is no future.
Hassan plans to stay in Italy, but nearly 3,000 children escaped from reception centres this year to continue their journeys to Northern Europe.
Now, for more on this, I'm now joined by Joel Millman from the International Organization for Migration. Hello, thanks very much indeed for being with us. Now, many children are arriving in Italy and other countries alone because their relatives died on the way. Italy did ask the EU for more money, but it's had to suspend its Mare Nostrum operation. What should the EU do to prevent the number of deaths at sea from rising?
Well, there's quite a lot of things they need to do. One is, we believe at IOM, there needs to be an effort to have places throughout the regions where migrants are being sent from or leaving to begin the process of resettlement, asylum applications, and any other kind of help that these migrants seek well before they get to the coast of the Mediterranean. There are places in the Sahara and some in West Africa, sometimes in the Horn of Africa, where we believe governments can join with local authorities to create stations of safety, perhaps to begin a process of abetting legal, safe migration to Europe and the resettlement there. The idea that we can allow them to cross these dangerous desert routes and then end up in even more danger on the coastal places of North Africa, principally Libya, where they're terribly abused, often exploited, sometimes trafficked into the sex commerce industry. All these things are avoidable if we can somehow meet the migrants closer to their homes and begin the process of resettlement long before they arrive at the Mediterranean shores.
Now, what would you say to people who argue that borders should be closed to stop migrants leaving to save lives?
I'd say to those people, those efforts don't work. The U.S. has closed its borders, made it much more difficult. It has not stopped migrants from coming. It has not stopped the deaths of migrants who come. In fact, the only time we've seen migrant deaths on the U.S.-Mexico border drop was precisely when the current administration, the Barack Obama administration in the U.S., began to process asylum seekers and put them into a system that opens a channel for legal resettlement. I mean, many people still criticize that this caused too many migrants to come, but we would argue that they'll be coming whether or not the U.S. changes its position. What we need to do, and what all countries need to do, is make that decision less of a lethal one, more of one that guarantees safe passage.
Now, you mentioned the US-Mexico border with the Mediterranean. What other areas are particularly of concern?
Well, these days, Bay of Bengal has become quite a lethal location. We have people fleeing Bangladesh, people fleeing Myanmar for points south. There's quite a lot of active trafficking going on. There's also a lot of refugees from places from Sri Lanka, from Afghanistan, from other parts of South Asia that are finding their way to those coasts and accessing what we consider extremely dangerous routes across the Bay of Bengal into Southeast Asia towards Australia. The Horn of Africa is another place, particularly the straits that connect Djibouti to Yemen. A rising number of deaths there, I think up to 250 so far this year, which is a huge increase from last year. Again, it's mostly people from the Horn of Africa, mostly trying to get to the Arabian Peninsula where they see jobs and sometimes a chance to reunite with families. And yet instead they're going across very unsafe places and dying by the dozens. And as I said earlier, up to 250,000 deaths already this year.
Right, let's focus now on the positive. What are the main benefits of migration?
Well, lots of benefits of migration. I mean, it benefits the migrant. Usually people don't decide to leave unless they see a clear benefit. It may be something as simple as access to a better food supply or just to be safe from an ongoing conflict. I think this is something we're seeing in Syria, first of all, and then Eritrea, places where it's extremely dangerous locally. So just the act of getting out of the country, getting out of the location where there's high levels of violence, that's the first benefit. Second benefit may be the resources that people gain when they go abroad, a better education, access to a higher income, better health opportunities, all those things begin to be transferable back to the home country, obviously as remittances, the value of the labor of these workers in more developed economies translates billions of dollars back to the countries of origin. But I think what the world needs to focus on is how much migrants benefit the receiving countries and themselves. I mean, we know of countries today, Australia, Canada, United States, they were all built from migrants. I mean, the contributions of migrants are the basis for those countries existing as they do today. So to deny that there are benefits from migration is to look history in the face and ignore all the facts. I mean, we see how countries built by an open migration policy are still thriving hundreds of years later. But more immediately, we understand that Europe has always been a source continent. Now it's becoming much more of a destination continent. And so that changes the way people need to think about migration. And at the moment, it's a tough change for some people in Europe, for many voters, and for many political parties to try to take advantage of that. But even there, the evidence is pretty clear. National debt would be much worse for countries that don't have migrants. Financing retirement benefits for an aging population is much more difficult without migrants. But also you have issues of can cities really afford to be declining in population? Can they empty out? You know, every place in the world where you've seen cities decline in population, the United States, parts of Eastern Europe, massive poverty follows in that displacement. So the idea that immigrants can come in and fill those spots, fill those jobs, fill those homes, take over those businesses, all those things are positive benefits for the people that are already there. Also, industries that are competing with third world or overseas labor, they get a huge benefit if new workers come who are willing to sacrifice a little bit more to live in the developed world.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but we're running out of time. I really appreciate you joining us for today's Focus segment, though. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.